Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Golfing Greenkeeper podcast. My name is Steve Smith, and I'm your host. I have on today's episode Walking the Fairways, and much like it was 2 episodes ago, Walking the Fairways was a bit of a narrow-fielded view, and it was a talk about my trip to Hobart, and I talked about a couple of the golf courses that I'd seen down there. Well, this one's even narrower. This one's about one golf course. This one is about Kingston Heath Golf Club in Melbourne, on the sandbelt of Melbourne, and I'm going to tell you about my trip there in early October, and it's going to give you a bit of insight, I think, in the lead up to this coming week's Australian Open, which is being held across both Victoria Golf Club and Kingston Heath Golf Club. And Kingston Heath will be the host of the golf on the weekend, so it's the sort of the final golf course to host the Australian Open. Ladies and gentlemen, sit back, relax, and I hope you enjoy this little bit of insight from my very first time playing Kingston Heath Golf Club. What a trip it was. I'm going to share lots of information with you that I experienced. This is episode number 98. Now, I'll just start off, ladies and gentlemen, with a quick comment about the Australian Men's PGA Championship that's just been held at Royal Queensland Golf Club, and a huge congratulations to Course Superintendent Adam Mills and the entire team, everyone involved with preparations for Royal Queensland. Possibly the worst week of weather I think I may have ever seen leading up to a tournament in Australia. Absolutely diabolical with rain, storms, courses underwater, damage to bunkers from all the heavy rain day after day leading up to the start of the tournament. And even obviously they lost the entire second round because of the weather. So congratulations to everyone involved there. Certainly to Superintendent Adam Mills, as I mentioned. The course was presented so well considering how terrible the conditions were, and hats off to everyone involved. And I've had a few conversations with a couple of people that were working there on course in the week, and hats off to everyone. Absolutely incredible. Big congratulations to the winner, Elvis Smiley, 22-year-old Elvis Smiley, for taking out the win, beating Cam Smith on the way home, and a couple of late runners. And what a win that was. What a great tournament to watch overall, and certainly one that Elvis will never forget, and one that we all enjoyed to watch. So congratulations to Elvis. Congratulations also to Adam Mills, Superintendent of the golf course, and everyone involved at Royal Queensland for the event up there at the Australian Men's PGA Championship. Now, ladies and gentlemen, as you know, Walking the Fairways is a bit of a news segment, but this one's more of, it's a bit of news and my experience at Kingston Heath Golf Club in Melbourne in the lead up to the Australian Open, which is both the men's and women's and all abilities all together in one, rolled into one big event. But I wanted to talk about this, and I hadn't had the chance previously, and I thought, what better time to do it than leading up to the Oz Open, when everyone will be, if you're not there on course watching, you'll be watching it no doubt on television. I want to give you a bit of insight into what I saw about my first and only time so far playing this hallowed ground of golf at Kingston Heath, and I wanted to share with you my experience and just what it was all about and what I thought. So hopefully when you're watching, if you've not been there before, I can give you a bit of an understanding as to what the golf course is going to be like. Hopefully the way you might see it and the way that the players might be experiencing it, and you'll hopefully get a little bit more of an understanding about what you're seeing on television or at the golf course itself, if you're lucky enough to be down that way and experiencing it on site. So I'll start at the beginning. It was early October. It was actually my birthday week that we travelled down to Melbourne, and I was down there for John Deere Golf Keeper of the Green, so I was doing some recordings on site. One of them you've already listened to. You've only got to go back a couple of episodes to number 95 with Richard Forsyth, Director of Courses there at Royal Melbourne Golf Club. That was one of the ones I was doing, and I'll let you in on a little bit of a secret. One is about to come out in the coming weeks, before Christmas. And it's with Director of Courses Glenn Stewart from Peninsula Kingswood. Let me tell you, that is an absolute perler that you're going to want to get a part of. So there's a little sneak peek. That one's coming. But that's what I was in Melbourne for, to do a couple of recordings down there. And while I was there, I had the opportunity to play golf for the very first time in my life, and I didn't know whether I'd ever get the opportunity to do so, but to play golf at Kingston Heath Golf Club. It's an incredible golf course. I've been lucky enough to see it once before with Superintendent Hayden Mead, who'd shown me around last year. I got a chance to see it with Hayden briefly, get a bit of an idea of a site. I'd never seen it before. So this time I was going in having a bit more of an understanding as to what the site was. And so it wasn't completely new to me, but rest assured, people, I've studied this golf course as much as you can from afar, so I more or less felt like I'd been there apart from actually being there. So there wasn't going to be too much that blew me away, although when you're there on site, it still blows you away anyway. But I'll set it up for you. I was down in Melbourne, as I mentioned, do a couple of recordings. So the opportunity to play the golf course. And firstly, I have to thank James, who was my playing partner and my host, who's a member of Kingston Heath Golf Club, who hosted me for the day there. I was his guest for the day, and it was, I say, a huge thank you to James for his time taking me around the golf course, educating me about the golf course. A lot of its history we talked about, and James is actually one of the historians of the club, and he's been doing a lot of work. We've shared previously a bit of knowledge together about Dan Suter and obviously the golf course at Kingston Heath, and I'll get into that a little bit more as to Dan Suter's background to the golf course. But thanks to James, because without that, I would not have had such an enjoyable time. And it was just the two of us going around. The golf course was pretty busy, but we had a couple of people weren't able to come and fill our time slot with us. So I got to be a proper tourist and really taking it all in. So let me set you up with Kingston Heath. If you don't know about Kingston Heath, you might be just learning about golf and getting an idea as to what to expect around golf courses. That's why you're listening to this podcast, hopefully. Kingston Heath Golf Club, the golf course at Kingston Heath, is currently considered reasonably high up in Australian golf and the world of golf. So much so that I'll give you three rankings where it is, and the rankings are all subjective. And it's a group of collective opinions, if you like. But we'll start off with Golf Australia magazine. Now, they rate Kingston Heath in their latest rankings of 2024. They've rated Kingston Heath at number 2 in Australia. Australian Golf Digest magazine have rated Kingston Heath at number 3 in Australia. So there's not much further to go. The only two above those are Royal Melbourne and Cape Wickham. So respectively in those rankings, and in the top 100 golf courses in the world, as ranked by top100golfcourses.com, Kingston Heath is rated number 20 on the planet. So that's just to give you a bit of an idea of where Kingston Heath is sitting in the world and how it's talked about in the world of golf. There's a lot of history to do with Kingston Heath, but this has all got to do with its design, its architecture, the way it's maintained to deliver that architecture as well and foster that in the process. So I just wanted to set the scene for where Kingston Heath sits so you get a bit of an idea as to where this hallowed ground is and why we speak so highly of it and why it's one of the hosts of the Australian Open, because it is ranked so highly and thought of so highly. From the outset, I want to mention that Kingston Heath is a private golf club, so you can't just ring up and book a tee time, which is, I get, it's a little bit frustrating for a lot of people, but there are ways in, particularly if you're from interstate or if you're international, you can contact the club and see if there's any availability for you to be able to play at a future date, or like I mentioned, I was lucky enough to be invited as a guest of a member. So I should stress that this isn't a Cape Wickham, an Ocean Dunes, Barnbugle. It's not a public access golf course. You can't just ring up and book. And that's one of the reasons why you often see these sorts of golf courses. Let's face it, all of the golf courses that have hosted our Australian Opens are private golf courses, basically. So because they have the money and the ability to put the attention and detail and spend the money on the architecture and that sort of stuff in its earliest days. So that's why we often see that. And Kingston Heath is no different. One of the reasons for talking to you about Kingston Heath on Walking the Fairways is because I actually got to walk the fairways for the first time. So I wanted to convey what I was feeling. And I wanted you to be able to potentially think about this in the lead up to what you're going to see this weekend, as I mentioned at the top of the podcast. Now, one of the first things that you're going to see is that the Kingston Heath routing that will be played for the Australian Open this coming week is different to the usual club routing of the golf course that's there day in, day out. And I want to come to those little differences a little bit later on in a little bit more detail. But first and foremost, what you're going to see is not the same routing as the golf course that's there day in, day out. Now, and I'm going to detail to you why those things happen, but I wanted to get that very clear first up. Now, I'm going to describe the golf course land for you so you can kind of get a bit of a feel for it, because I think it's quite different to anything that we're probably used to seeing. There's no water bodies anywhere, really. There's a creek line down the sides of a couple of the holes, but there's no water that's on the golf course that's going to affect golf, like we see at the Australian, for example, in Sydney. There's not a great deal of elevation change across the golf. It's nothing like the land of Royal Melbourne, which I found quite interesting. Having been taken around by Richard a couple of times at Royal Melbourne, I find Kingston Heath is relatively flat. Overall, I'd probably be inclined to say Kingston Heath is very subtle in its elevation changes throughout the golf course. And that's quite interesting for such a highly respected golf course. And what that means is that what elevation changes there are have been utilised extremely well in the design and the architecture of the golf course overall. So it's reasonably flat on face value. Now, don't forget, you may not be aware, but I'll say don't forget, this land was originally farming land before it was a golf course in 1925 when it opened. So it was used for a very different purpose. And you can kind of see, and as James was pointing out to me, you can kind of see a little bit of those remnants of the humps as you walk down the first fairway, which I'm told are the remains or the remnants of the original furrows from the farming land that was done on the property. And once you start to see and it's pointed out to you, go, oh, okay, they're in rows. Like it's quite obvious that that's what was done there once it's pointed out to you. Otherwise, you just think they were little humps and hollows. But that's what was originally there. So it was a farming space before it was a golf course, and that's why they were able to get hold of the property, if you like. Now, the club has a throwback to the original use of the land, which is the new short course that they've recently built as a little 9-hole short course down the eastern end of the property. And that's actually called the Furrows, is the name of that little short course. And the logo of the Furrows golf course is an old tractor. Now, I do know a little bit about my tractors on a side note, and I'm pretty sure the image is probably a bit of an outline sketch of a Massey Ferguson 35X for all you tractor buffs out there and farming people out there. You might know some of the old Massey Ferguson 35X tractors. They were a staple piece of machinery on many farms back in the day, and I can vouch for that as well, because we actually had one at Katoomba Golf Club where I was superintendent, and they are absolutely bulletproof, let me tell you. Fantastic tractors. And I'm pretty sure when I saw it, that's what I was like, oh, that was our little red girl from Katoomba. Same. Now, the routing of the golf course is quite interesting. To give you an idea, 9 out of the 15 holes that are not par 3s, so there's 3 par 3s on the golf course, so 9 of the remaining 15 holes have some sort of bend in the hole, like a dogleg, if you like, and some more than others. If you look at the golf course from a satellite view or on a map, the holes are quite sort of well jigsawed into place, with some going up and back from each other. But there's a lot of bends, there's a lot of doglegs, which is what I noticed playing the golf course. Unlike some of the other courses, or most of other golf courses that I played, there just seemed to be a lot more little doglegs or genuine dogleg holes, which I thought was quite interesting. Other than most of the golf courses I've played, to be fair. And so that really stood out to me, is the shapes of the golf holes. So when you're watching this weekend, have a look at the shapes, at the tee shots that these players will need to shape to make the most and to get the lowest scores and really attack potentially some of the holes that they want to get birdies on. You'll see a lot of shot shaping from tees. You'll see some iron play on some of the short par 4s. That's one of the things I want you to look for, is some of these bending holes, because that's the majority of the longer holes, 9 out of the 15. Now, the block of land is sort of longer north-south than it is east-west. It's basically essentially a rectangle shape, if you like. So it's safe to assume, looking on that, the majority of the holes are going to run roughly north-south with the longest part of the longest lengths of the block, which they kind of do. But this is where Dan Suter's genius comes into the routing and the design. Now, Dan Suter designed the golf course for the golf club when they first purchased the land in 1923, and eventually it opened in 1925. Now, he really designed something special. He uses a lot of dog legs or bends in the par 4s and 5s, like I've mentioned. And the way that they jigsaw into place is the unique part of this routing. It could easily have been designed up and back, but Suter's done something really, really unique with this routing, and it really stands out once you start to think about what you've played and what you're looking at. I want you to really focus on seeing some of those dogleg holes, or the majority of them, and have a look at what they're doing to the golfers. Now, the course routing is essentially the north half of the golf course, followed by the south half of the golf course, if you can kind of get an idea. So for the normal club routing, they play sort of the northern half of the course in the first 9, and then the course works to the southern half of the golf course for the back 9. And that's the way that the routing is for the everyday members. It doesn't go near the clubhouse at halfway. It doesn't pass the clubhouse at halfway. It's not a stop at halfway. But the 6th hole kind of goes back near the clubhouse, if you like. So it's a really interesting thing that there's no return at 9. So in effect, it completely bypasses the clubhouse, basically. So that's a bit of the routing that Suter did. But like I said, it didn't follow any convention of returning to 9. He designed a golf course that fit best for the land and that routed the best. The lay of the land itself, there's a really sort of a subtle but obvious ridge line that runs north-south straight across the 1st and the 6th fairways. And that's sort of, it's there when you see when you're teeing off the first hole. You hit to this little crest. And if you bomb it down there, and I got one away on the first tee shot, which was brilliant. But if you bomb it down there, you can go over the crest and then you see the green. But if you're not quite far enough, that subtle rise of a couple of meters, that's probably more than a couple of meters, is enough to obscure your view of the first green. So if you don't hit it up to the top of that crest, you can't see the first green itself. You might see the top of the flag, but that is enough to really obscure your next shot to the green straight away from the first hole. So like I said, the golf course is almost flattish, but it's kind of just got these subtle rises and falls around the place, which really do enough just to obscure your depth of field. Sometimes you just don't quite see some of the important things that you would like to see for your shots that you need to play into the greens, for example. So that ridge line's there, and it's also there in return when you play back up the 6th hole. There's also a larger one that comes from the edge of the property on the inside of the corner of the 17th hole, which then runs east-west as well, and it runs across 17, across 8, across 9, across 16, and lifting to probably what's the highest point of the golf course on the 15th green, or pretty close to it. It feels like it anyway. The 15th green, that's the famous, well-known par 3, which is an uphill par 3 to a blind green surface. So it really does trick you into a few places. There's not these really big, bold movements in the ground, but the way that the course is routed, there's enough to obscure you. And it's always there. It's ever present in this golf course. And I actually found it really interesting and rather off-putting sometimes. Now, I mentioned that Dan Suter designed the golf course. I've done a lot of studying of Dan Suter and his work as an architect, which I detailed in an episode of the podcast back in number 11. So if you want to go way back, I did an Aussie Golf history episode of Dan Suter himself and his history. That was where I did a great deal of research. Now, Suter did the routing of Kingston Heath, and Royal Melbourne Golf Club hired out Mick Morecambe, who built Royal Melbourne. At the time, he was looking after the golf course of Royal Melbourne, but not the east and west courses that we know about. It was the previous versions of Royal Melbourne Golf Course. But Royal Melbourne hired out Mick Morecambe to build Kingston Heath, to build the golf course for the club when it moved to this particular site in 1923 and opened in 1925. Now, the club, after it opened in 1925, in late 1926, they actually ditched Dan Suter, and they'd heard that Alistair Mackenzie was coming because of Royal Melbourne basically paying to bring him out to design the golf courses, or the golf course at Royal Melbourne West. And Kingston Heath said, okay, righto, well, we've got the design routing and we didn't open up with any bunkers. We wanted to wait and see. But now that we know that Mackenzie's coming out, we're just going to get Mackenzie in and he's going to do our bunker design for the golf course. This wasn't unusual to build a golf course without the bunkers in it. They wanted to get out there and play golf, and don't forget this is 1925. They didn't have all the machinery we have today where they can just go and smash things out. So they ditched Suter for Mackenzie. Mackenzie came after the course had been opened, and he did a detailed bunker plan for the golf course. And he also, the only real design change that he did at the golf course was that Mackenzie famously said that there wasn't really anything to change with the golf course. He thought it was so well done. The only thing that he wanted to change that he didn't think was very good was the short par 4 15th, which he turned into the uphill par 3 that we know today, and he brought the green back to the crest of the hill where it's located today to make it the par 3. It used to be up and further along as a short par 4, and he didn't want that. He didn't like it, and he thought it would be a better hole if it was this uphill par 3. Now that said, I found a newspaper article where this exact change was first mooted by Royal Melbourne's professional Arthur Lefebvre, who started his career underneath Suter as a trainee professional earlier at Manly Golf Club in Sydney. And Arthur Lefebvre would then go on to be the professional at Royal Melbourne Golf Club. And he actually wrote an article, which I've discovered, where he talks about making the 15th a par 3 and putting the green up on top of the crest of the hill. Now, his article was a year before Mackenzie even came to Australia. So it was after the golf course was opened, but before Mackenzie had come to Australia. So as a little side note, who really designed the 15th hole? That's another story for another time, I guess. But needless to say, the only change from the 1925 opening of Kingston Heath Golf Course that Dan Suter routed, the only change was that they would make the 15th from a short par 4 to a par 3, and that's what we have today. So really interesting. So what you're seeing out there is a golf course that's nearly 100 years old. Next year, it's going to be 100 years old. Now, the only unusual thing about the golf course is that all of the par 5s play due south, and I thought that was really interesting. And if the wind is from the south, like it was when I played it in early October, and when I played it was only about a 1 to 2 club wind into the wind, these holes play extra long. So they're not super long holes, around 500 metres, 470, something along those lines, 500, 520. But when it's a 1 to 2 club extra wind, a headwind, they play really long. But they all play the same direction, which is a little bit unusual because the rest of the golf course changes direction so much in and around as you play the routing. Now, that's the lay of the land, but what about how it plays? Well, look, like I said, you're always changing direction, which I find quite interesting. So the first plays east, for example. The second plays sort of west and then southwest, and the third southwest style, and then the fourth plays northeast type thing. Then the fifth plays east, and the sixth plays west. The seventh plays south. The eighth plays south again, but then the ninth turns sort of northeast and then sort of almost northwest as a dogleg bends. The 10th plays due east. The 11th. So you're always turning corners more or less when you're playing this golf course, which is really interesting. So I looked at the routing and the way that the holes are positioned. You could completely change the way that you play this golf course in order. And some of the holes would be up and back, and they would be more monotonous than we're used to seeing a lot of other golf courses. But this is the other thing that Suter did: is that not only is there a majority of dogleg or bending holes in the longer holes, he also made sure that the order and the routing that you play golf in means that you're usually always changing direction from one hole to the next, except for, like I mentioned, only a very few couple of instances where you'll play. Like I said, you'll play 7 and 8, which are pretty close to a similar line, and 17 and 18, which again are pretty close in a similar sort of a due north. the way that those two holes will play. So it's quite well done that you're always changing direction, but you will come back. So I found that quite interesting, and that's something that really stood out to me as well, is that the routing order for the everyday club routing of the golf course, I thought that was really, really well done and stood out quite a great deal. There's also a couple of blind tee shots, which aren't blind, but they're blind enough so that they rise quickly. There's a couple at the 8, which rises quickly in front of the tee, not far in front of the tee, but it doesn't rise too far. It's just enough. Again, just enough so that you can't see the landing area of the fairway, which means that you're kind of a little bit lost. The sixth is a great one I liked when you're coming back and you're hitting over that first ridge that you played down the first hole. It's not in front of you, but it's far enough down. It's easy to hit over the crest of the 6th fairway and be in the middle of the fairway, but you just can't quite see it. And you can see the clubhouse that you're playing back towards, but you can't see the landing area of the fairway. So then it dips over the crest, and then it rises back up ever so slightly again towards the green. And this is something that's really, really interesting about the subtlety of the movement of the land and the way that the golf course is routed. And I really liked that. I really found that quite interesting without being a difficult walk. Like I said, it's quite flat. So it's easy to work your way around the golf course, but then there's a number of these little unique things about it, which is really quite refreshing and rather testing, but without you even realizing that it's testing you so well. I really like that part of it too. The green complexes and the bunker complexes are fantastic. Instead of having couple of really large bunkers, you have a couple of ones broken apart, and then instead of having a couple of small ones broken apart, you've got these really large meandering ones of the bunker complexes. The greens are well positioned. Some of them run the diagonal line, so it depends which side of the fairway on, depending on your approach. For example, the one that stands out there for me was the 4th. One of the great green complexes I loved was the 3rd, which I found quite challenging. It's under 300 metres where we played the golf hole, and I took a 7. And I did it on my ear. I did it easy. I had a great drive, hit it to where I wanted to. I was only a wedge out, and I hit an iron off a tee because it narrows quite well when you get up there, and I didn't know the golf course. So I thought, well, put it in play and be safe. And then I missed the green, which is sort of a skinny, narrow green, reasonably steep back to front sloping green. Don't forget, I played the course. It was more or less 7 weeks out from this tournament, and it was playing incredibly well. I mean, the golf course was flawless. Greens were running smooth and quite quick. You didn't have to bash them down the hill. They would keep rolling. They were a little bit soft because they had a little bit of wet weather in the lead up. They're going to be firming up towards this event for sure. I'm pretty certain. It's been drying out quite a bit in Melbourne. But the complexes are really fantastic. So I missed to the right on the 3rd green. I had never played out of sandbelt bunkers before. It's quite a heavy sand. It's a thick sand. It's almost like cake mix is how I described it, because they were a little bit damp when I'd played there. And I hit it into the bunker still in front of me, and then the next one I hit into the bunker in front of me, because over the other side of the green are more bunkers, and I didn't want to go long. The next one, sure enough, I hit it over the green into the other bunkers. Then I hit one coming back, and then I had a downhill putt, and they're quick downhill, and it was a slider left to right. Needless to say, I had a couple more putts, and I walked off with a 7. Did it on my ear after being in the box seat for 1. But these are the things. You can't miss it on the wrong side of the green. It's rather demanding depending on where the pins are. The greens are generous in size, generally speaking, but you can tuck some pins into interesting areas. And if you've got a longer iron shot, you've got to flirt with the edge of a green near a big swale or a bunker. It's really quite fascinating. So one of the things I want you to look for at this weekend's tournament is how players, where they're going to miss on the greens. So there'll be some pins tucked over towards bunkers and trying to tempt the player to attack. And it'll be interesting to see who's playing where within the week, where they are on the leaderboard, and who's going to miss it safely to the middle of the green. That's going to depend on the weather as well, but who's going to miss it safely to the middle of the green and have a longer putt for birdie, and who might go for the attack depending on where they are on the leaderboard. So that's something I want you to look for as well. There's got a couple of great short par 4s that it will be interesting to see how they attack them, how the players are going to attack them. So you're gonna get to see lots of things, and Kingston Heath really it's going to bring that out really, really well. And I didn't realise any of this stuff until I got a chance to play it. That's what's so interesting about it. So it's really fascinating. The green complexes really get you thinking as a player, probably nearly more so than any course I've ever played before. Most of the time, I often just try and see if I can just hit the green for one, but these are built and shaped and oriented in such a way that it really has you wondering whether you want to bite off a little bit more than you can chew to make it, because there's some good slopes in the greens. So you can be in a safe spot and have a diabolical putt, for example, and you don't want that. That's not helpful, especially when you're playing for a tournament. So again, watching these players and how they shape shot from the tee, what they're going to attack and what they're going to sort of miss to safety on the greens, it's going to be really fascinating to watch. I think it's going to be quite interesting. So there's a lot of challenge in the angles to the greens, and that's something that's going to be quite interesting. I've got no doubts about it. Now, the tournament routing changes things. It changes it a little bit. And look, when I first heard, when James told me that it's a different routing, I was kind of puzzled at first. Then I was a bit annoyed, and the further I got into the golf course, I was starting to get a bit frustrated, because I was like, this is brilliant. This is actually better than I thought as a thinking golf course. I thought, why would they change it? And then I kind of got over it, because it is what it is. Tournament golf these days is so different to normal golf that it doesn't matter what the course they're playing on. It's nice that they're playing Kingston Heath. It's nice that they play Royal Melbourne. We all love and talk about the composite golf course at Royal Melbourne. I've never understood it myself, but they use it, and they use it fantastically well because it's on the one paddock. The main paddock because Royal Melbourne's broken up into a couple of different paddocks by roads. So the composite course is in the main paddock. But Kingston Heath is all on one paddock. So why change the routing? Well, to me, it has to do with a 2-tee start for the fields, because we all know the first 2 days of tournament golf, they play off the back nine and the front nine. Because Kingston Heath doesn't return to the clubhouse, really, except for it goes near it with a 6th green, which make it the 7th tee, you can't have 2-tee starts. So the way that they rejig the routing means that they do have 2-tee starts, because they bring the 9th green back to the clubhouse by playing the 6th as the 9th. And then the 1st becomes a 10th. So unless you've got a map in front of you, it's going to be completely confusing for me to try and describe to you the way the routing has changed. But needless to say, where the golf course goes from playing the north half of the course for the front nine, and that 9th hole and 9th green 10th tee finishes somewhere in the middle of the golf course site itself, nowhere near the clubhouse, then the back nine, you play the southern part of the golf course, and the 18th comes back to the clubhouse, right up the boundary to finish. Well, the way that they rejig the routing is they start on the 7th hole. That is the normal club routing for a tournament, for the Australian Open. So they start on 7, which heads straight to the middle of the golf course. So it becomes an inner and outer loop. So the first 9 of the tournament routing plays the holes in the middle of the golf course, and the 9th will come back at the 6th green as the 9th green, which isn't, like I said, not too far from the clubhouse, but it's not next to the clubhouse. It's not too far away. But the difference is you then walk to the first tee, which becomes your 10th tee for the tournament, which is right next to the pro shop. So they're going to be walking up that way. So it kind of works then. So you can have 2-tee starts. So then they play the outer golf holes of the golf course routing, and they bring into effect the 19th hole, which is a par 3 played at the eastern end of the first. And it's a little par 3 in there. It's a beautiful little hole. You wouldn't know that it's a spare hole. It's that good. And they keep it in such good condition that it's part of the golf course. And they change the routing often from time to time as well, from what I've heard, as they might need to take some holes out depending on what they're doing. But they can play different routings at any time. But usually speaking, like I said, the one that I played was generally speaking the members' golf course routing. So the tournament routing becomes an inner and outer loop of holes. So the front 9, the first 9 is the inner part of the golf course land, and then the back 9 plays the outer perimeter holes essentially and works its way around the perimeter of the property to start from the pro shop and basically finish at the other side of the clubhouse as well. So that's why they do it, is so they have a 2T start for tournaments. That is essentially the main reason as to why. But it also changes some of the starting holes. So instead of starting off with a reasonable length look, the first fairway is like a runway. It's one of the widest fairways I've started on, apart from maybe the first at Linwood in Western Sydney. That is like a runway as well. But the first for a tournament is the 7th on the members routing, and that's a par 5 for the members as they play it. And I'm pretty sure that could well play as a par 4 for the tournament. Don't quote me on that, but my guess is it may well play as a par 4, certainly for the men, I would think. The other thing about the routing is I said they play their spare hole, which becomes their 11th. They actually take out the 10th hole. Now, the 10th hole at Kingston Heath is a fantastic little par 3. I think it's about 125 metres long. You can nearly throw it there. Slightly downhill, a very small, narrow tongue of the green, and slowly sort of works in a reverse triangle, if you like, and the green gets wider as you get further back. Completely surrounded by bunkers. You have to land it on the green, essentially. It's a wonderful little hole, but they remove that from the tournament routing, and they bring in the 19th so that you don't. They make one of the holes really long, so it plays over the 10th tee, and they rework that little junction in the centre of the golf course, which is where that 10th is. So they take the 10th out. It's one of their fantastic little holes, or the fantastic little hole, apart from 15. So that's why they change it. So the routing, again, just a reminder, the routing that you'll see for the tournament is going to be different than what the club usually plays, and it's going to be different to the one that everyone basically ranks the golf courses on. For those rankings that I said, where the Kingston Heath is rated number 2, number 3, and number 20 in the world, it's a different routing. So like I said, the green complexes are very thoughtful. They get you thinking. They get you thinking from the tee, how you want to attack it. You're going to watch the players do this. There's a number of blind tee shots. Kingston Heath has it all, and this is one of the reasons why, if not the reason why, because it has so much going for it, let alone the site, the environment, everything, the way the course is maintained, it's presented, it's the turf surfaces. I mean, there is literally so many parts to this golf course that are done so well, including the architecture and the design, that get you really thinking about how you go around it. And I think one of its best features is its subtlety and the fact that it's not flat, but it's a fantastic piece of land, and Kingston Heath really, really does have it all. Now, when you're watching golf this weekend, I want you to have a bit of a think about some of these holes that I've got for you to watch. These are the standout holes, some of the holes to watch in my opinion. They're going to be the uphill par 3 15th, which is an absolutely spectacular golf hole. I'm going to post up some of the photos again from my golf trip. I'll put them up on social media. So get onto Instagram and Facebook, and you'll see some of them. I want you to see what your thoughts are. If you've played it, I want you to comment and see what your thoughts are as well. I'll be interested to hear what you've got to say about some of the holes. But 15, so the closing stretch is brilliant, but 15 is going to be a real standout for me. It's uphill. It's 100 and, I don't know what it plays from the back. It's probably 170 odd from the back, meters that is. Uphill, bunkers all the way up the hill and to the right. It falls off extremely sharp at the front, and there's bunkers, and extremely steep on the right. So if there's a bit of a breeze, a westerly wind, that's going to be playing left to right across the 15th as a par 3. If players missing it, they could be, chances are they'll be at least a couple of metres below the green surface. That's how steep the drop-off is from that crest where the green is. And it's a steep back-to-front sloping green. It's a fantastic golf hole. It is going to be a make or a break, I think, in the final round, how people play that hole, because it's very unforgiving. A standout, this is the tournament routing. A standout of the holes, another holes to watch are 3 and 6, 2 short par 4s that I think are going to be really, really interesting to see how they play. 3, which is the 9th of the normal routing for the golf course, the third hole for the tournament, is a dogleg left par 4, short par 4, and I cannot wait to see how they play. Dogleg right to left, bunkers on the inside of the dogleg left, bunkers on the outside of the open side of the dogleg towards the green on the right, which also protects the right-hand side of the green as well. It's going to be really interesting to see how many different ways there are to play this golf hole. And likewise, the 6th, for the tournament routing, which is the, as I just get my map out, which is the third for the normal routing. This is the one that I had 7 or 8 on, or whatever it was I had. Again, under, I think it'll be around 300, maybe 320 metres for the pros by the time they put the tee back. I played it, I think it was about 290. Going to be really interesting to see how they attack that one. Whether they go up towards and miss in the bunker on purpose to then get a shot where they can spin it up to land it on the green and potentially attack a pin, or whether they want to be a wedge out 100 metres, 80 metres, and give themselves a bit more of an attacking way from that direction. So different players will have different ways of doing that. I think that's going to be interesting. The 16th hole is a blind tee shot, dogleg right. Don't go left because there's all tea tree and stuff out there. It's going to get you in the weeds, and it's a massive double green. Like I said, this golf course has everything. So there's a massive double green on 16, but dogleg right, blind landing area from the tee. So again, it'll be interesting to see what the players do, where they go, how much they'll bite off on the dogleg on the right as it turns the hole. And the first, as an opening hole, it's going to be a very good hole to start with, reasonably straight, due south. So depending on which way the wind is blowing, but it's going to be a reasonable test to see how they start. And a unique thing about the green on the first is that it's very steep sloping back to front. It's got some really cool pin placements that they can have, but it's got a very steep front bank. So if you're short, you can't run it up to the green. You've really got to fly it there. So depending on how far some of these guys are hitting their drives and what they're going to take for a second shot and the wind. There's a few instances there that I think will form together to see just what they're going to have to deal with on the first hole. But a good starting hole for the tournament. I think it's going to be brilliant to see. It's going to be one to watch that you probably may not get too much of it to see, to be honest, being early in the round, except for maybe the last round. But I think they're the holes. So for me, 15, 3, 6, 16 and 1 are probably in order of my favourites to watch. I think that's what you're going to be interested in seeing, but keep an eye on the dog legs. Keep an eye on where their tee placements will be and how they're going to attack some of those holes, where they're going to miss to on the green for safety to then give themselves, a way to miss and not be into trouble, but then they probably won't be able to attack the flags like someone else will be to get another shot up on them. So there's a bit of fun there, ladies and gentlemen, to watch. It's all three, the men's, women's, and all abilities for the Australian Open this coming week at Kingston Heath and Victoria Golf Club. But Kingston Heath is on show this weekend. It's the only course they'll be playing for the last 2 rounds. And it's going to be a lot of fun. I really hope you get a bit of time to watch it on telly, and certainly if you're down in Melbourne or you're travelling to Melbourne for it, you get to take it all in. Have a look at the lay of the land if you're walking the golf course, if you're walking those fairways, much like I did when I was playing golf. Study some of those elevation changes. Have a bit of a look across fairways and down fairways where you can, just to see how you can't quite see landing areas. That really does affect, it may not affect the pros so much, but on their last round, it'll probably start affecting them for overthinking. But as a player, it really does affect you because you can't quite see where you're landing. You lose that depth of field. You lose a little bit of tangibility in your shot. And look at some of the slopes and the green complexes. Take a look into the design and architecture of Kingston Heath. The more you look, the deeper you look, the more you start to scratch the surface harder and deeper, and you really start to realise how complex and well done Kingston Heath is as a golf course from a golf course design and architecture perspective, in my opinion. I really think it's a really good thinkers golf course. I haven't played Royal Melbourne and I haven't played Cape Wickham, so I can't compare. But in terms of the golf courses I've played, it is without doubt my number one, and a really fascinating thinkers golf course on many levels. And like I said, on face value, it doesn't really look like it. But once you get into it, it becomes this really, really deep thinkers golf course. And look, I can't praise it enough. I was blown away. Now, Hayden Mead is the superintendent of the golf course, and he's leading the team preparing Kingston Heath for the Australian Open this weekend. And I wish everyone involved well. And I know there's a few people. Young Casey is Casey Williams from WA. She's an apprentice over at Bustleton Golf Club. and she's heading across to volunteer as part of preparations for the Australian Open. And of course, there's the wonderful Sophie Warren, who was just on the last episode, number 97, on John Deere Golf Keeper of the Green, Sophie Warren from Glenelg Golf Club, who's going to be there as well. So if you see these two fantastic young female greenkeepers out there, make sure you say hello. And they're going to be out there as part of this larger team preparing both Kingston Heath and Victoria Golf Clubs for the Australian Open. Ladies and gentlemen, that's a quick Walking the Fairways from me. I say thank you for listening, and I really hope you get a bit of time to watch some golf this weekend and really enjoy it. Men, women, you're going to see the golf course played in so many different ways. So take some time to enjoy it. Thank you so much for listening, ladies and gentlemen. It's been a real ripper, this one, being able to share my insight with you of Kingston Heath and when I was out there walking the fairways. Please leave a comment. Please like, share, and subscribe. Thank you so much for listening. Enjoy the Australian Open. I'll leave you with it. You hit them clean, we'll keep them green, and I'll catch up with you very soon.